have very wide-ranging powers.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Mark, let's come to you now. And elections.
Yes. In my research over the years, I've, of course, found that the main control levers for controlling populations is money, media, elections. Sometimes I just call it MME for short. And given the prodigious amount of executive orders coming out of the White House, unprecedented with this second Trump administration, it's been a challenge as to which ones to cover. So based on these main control levers, I reported about money a little earlier today, the author Conrad LeBeau. I'll mention in passing about that first report today that Conrad ultimately emphasizes, of course, that the U.S. would cut the Fed out altogether and issue its own currency, debt and interest free, which would be removing a significant control measure from the population of the U.S. and ultimately beyond because of the ripple effects that would happen. I wanted to put that cherry on top for my previous report. But this March 25th executive order is quite significant here, according to an author that and a activist that I'll mention in a minute, preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections. And there's some laudable things here. This is an issue I've followed for a long time, so I know what to look for. And in this is right from the executive order. It points out that in tabulating votes, Germany and Canada require the use of paper ballots counted in public by local officials, something that activists and critics have been talking about a long time in the U.S., but we can't seem to get there. And it also points out that countries like Denmark and Sweden sensibly limit mail-in voting to those. They limit it to those who are unable to vote in person due to, handicaps and things like that, physical handicaps. And those countries like Denmark and Sweden do not count late arriving votes regardless of the date of postmark. But many American elections now feature mass voting by mail, with many officials accepting ballots without postmarks or those received well after the official election day. So this executive order is pointing out a number of things that key critics I've interviewed over the years have pointed out. And we'll move on from there. There's another important part of this. And in the next slide, it talks about, here we go. The United States has not adequately enforced federal election requirements. And basically what it comes down to is that there are a number of existing laws that simply aren't being enforced. In other words, it's not a matter of Congress needing to pass a whole lot of new laws. And this happens a lot with the border too. The border has a number of laws on the books and regulations that simply aren't enforced. And the same goes for achieving election integrity. Now, Garland Favorito is the main activist who's been working in the state of Georgia, really doing yeoman's efforts, guys, to show, first of all, that there really is major election fraud happening in the U.S., including in the 2020 elections, but also providing very good examples on how to combat election fraud. And anyway, I have some quotes from Garland in terms of his reaction to this executive order. This is one of them we'll put up here. And he would know. He would know all the particulars to judge this executive order. He said this EO is a great first step. I expect more orders coming on election integrity. It shows Trump and his team have done their research. And that's reassuring to hear. And talking about his work at the state level, I just talked to Garland yesterday on the phone. He said there's a bill in Georgia about hand-marked paper ballots and another to get the state of Georgia out of what is called ERIC. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's yet another bill to help resolve invalid voter registrations. Now, moving on from there, I'll just mention here with this slide that there is an existing interview with Garland Favorito from the fall of 2023. Viewers can check that out. And he explains in painstaking detail that there genuinely and truly is election fraud going on at a very fundamental level, and that the main problem is the electronic vote tabulating machines, not so much voter ID and all these other miscellaneous issues that are talked about. Now, what is ERIC? That was mentioned briefly by Garland, and he wants to get the state of Georgia out of it. It is the Electronic Registration Information Center, and their stated mission is to help states improve the accuracy of America's voter rolls, increase access to voter registration for all eligible citizens, reduce election costs, and increase efficiencies in elections. And the next slide will show that everything basically looks like it's on the up and up. It shows that Jonathan Marks is the chairman of ERIC, and he's the deputy secretary of elections for Pennsylvania. And Blake Evans is the immediate past chair, and he's the director of elections for the state of Georgia itself. So everything looks to be on the up and up. Just a coalition of state officials that run elections. However, when you look at the background and who created ERIC, and this is something Garland pointed out, that creator is David Becker, a very left-leaning election law advocate and the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Election Innovation Research. He previously worked at Pew Charitable Trust, where he organized the creation of ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. He also worked for the ultra-left-wing People for the American Way, and he worked in the Department of Justice, where he got in a number of scrapes. He got in trouble for actually meddling in elections in sort of an indirect fashion. So all in all, the executive order from the Trump administration, guys, is firing on a number of good cylinders and pushing most of the right buttons. As Garland, who is very much an expert on this, has to say, there's more to be seen. There's more that ought to be done. But the election situation in the U.S. has long been egregiously out of whack with the very untrustworthy non-public counting of the votes. Votes are cast in public but counted in secret. And that's been a huge, huge issue here. And hopefully we're seeing the beginning of the end of these very secretive vote counts that have plagued the U.S. for decades. So we'll see. But with Garland's stamp of approval on this, things are looking good so far. So back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay.